Record. And then I'm going to do the stinger, so then we'll be quiet for like 10, 11 seconds.
Okay.
I know it's going to be real hard for you, Deanna, but... All right.
I'll wait for my cue.
All right, I'm going to play it right now. Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Anime Review. You're probably noticing that these aren't the deep and sultry tones of Zach that you're used to, and that's because he's actually away visiting family in Iowa. So until then, I will be holding down the fort with my friend Deanna. How's it going, Deanna?
Hey, it's going okay.
Good to hear. Clearly haven't done this before, so let's see how this goes. We're not going to be covering Trigun this week. We like to have everyone present when we discuss that, so we'll be finishing off that series next week. We're also messing with the order of the shows. We usually go alphabetical, but this time Deanna would have like 5 shows back to back to back, and I don't want to put her through that, so we are going to kind of be jumbling around the order. And yeah, so I guess right off the bat, I just want to get out there that I did drop Hinomaru Zumou. I feel like a lot of the time we don't really discuss why we dropped it or when we dropped it, but yeah, I ended up dropping that one just because 5 minutes into the 3rd episode, it kind of became apparent that they weren't trying to tell the story that I fell in love with, so I ended up dropping that. It pains me to do so, but yeah, hopefully we'll enjoy discussing the other shows that we're talking about. So yeah, moving on to recapping the week. That is the JoJo thumbnail, which shouldn't be there. There we go. So yeah, we're going to start with something a little lighter than the very dark Attack on Titan Bananafish combo we usually start with. So Deanna, what's going on with Bloom Into You?
So, as of right now, the student council elections are occurring, and Yu has been helping Toko out with her campaign speech. And so I have to emphasize that this show is really slow. So for anyone who needs angst or drama, this show isn't for you. I'm holding out on this show because of Yu. Like, I feel like she's such an interesting character with how composed she is despite Toko's affections for her. Because, you know, with like romantic anime, like sometimes the person would be like flustered and stuff, but with Yu, she's just so calm. And then she even asks Toko like, "Oh, just how much do you like me?" When Toko shows up with a gift at Yu's family's bookstore. So we also learned that Toko isn't always so confident, and that she used to be a very shy kid, but she learned how to become her ideal self throughout the years. And that Toko, she only shows her weak side to you, and at that point Yu is like, "You don't have to be special to get me to notice you. I'd rather see your weak side because that's part of who you are." And so I'm happy with the relationship that they're showing us right now, and it's quite endearing because they're taking things slow, but Yu, she doesn't take advantage of Toko's feelings for her either. So there's already like this understanding between them that love takes time. So I'm happy that there won't be any miscommunications that will start drama, or at least not at this point. But I am a little concerned as to how the show will keep its momentum because right now I guess we're done with the first arc, which is Toko becoming the student council president and Yu joining the student council club. Since in the beginning she was unsure about which club to join, and then yeah, I'm assuming we'll get either more emphasis on the side characters or some new ones that'll show up later on to get the pot stirring. So yeah, I'm enjoying it so far, but hopefully it'll get more interesting later on.
All right, that's good to hear. I feel like we do talk about pacing a lot when it comes to these shows, so I almost prefer slower than to quicker because it seems like you can skip over a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems like if you're focusing on something like relationships and getting to know a person, that stuff does take time. So I like the idea of them not really just pacing through it as quickly as they can.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds promising. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Okay, so taking a complete tonal shift, we're going to be moving into JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Not so much a romance anime. But, so yeah, last week we ended with Giorno defeating Bruno and then kind of recruiting him to his side, sharing his dreams of taking down the head of the gang that he works with so they can get drugs off the streets and make Naples more of a safe place to live. And so Bruno decides to actually wager on Giorno's dreams and joins his team. He does give him the small discrepancy, however, that should anyone learn that he's betraying the gang, he's pretty much on his own, because traitors in this gang are kind of dealt with swiftly and accurately, and he's pretty much like, you're on your own if that ends up happening. So we learn a little more about the gang. We learn that it's called Passione, and that it is led by a single person who has like these recruiting officers all around Naples. And Bruno takes him to one named Polpo, who is this recruiter who's actually being held in prison, who will conduct his entrance interview. And Polpo, based on this thumbnail that I shared, is this giant hulking ball of a man who Giorno actually mistakes for a bed when he walks into the prison. And then he kind of like unfolds himself out of the shape of a bed and just like rolls upright and starts talking to Giorno. And then his entrance interview kind of begins to join this gang. And he basically tells Giorno that in this gang, the one thing that someone needs is trust, the ability to place their trust in someone. And so in order to test this, what he does is he gives him a lighter, and he says, if you can keep the flame of this lighter lit for 24 straight hours and return to me the next day with this flame still lit, you'll be a part of the gang. And so Giorno kind of takes this a little too lightly. Like, I think he does what we all would do, is like, okay, I'll just go home and sit with the lighter and keep the flame going until tomorrow. But he's kind of immediately met with trials. Like, he goes out and right off the bat, he has to get like a pat down because this is in prison and they have to make sure they didn't receive anything from the prisoners. So they're patting him down and he has to kind of conceal the flame in his hand, and like while it's singeing his hand, he has to like get this pat down from this officer. Later, he ends up having to like cover it from the wind. He ends up having to hide it from Koichi, who ends up breaking into his house to steal back his passport that he stole in the first episode. And so he makes it off scot-free with all these things, and then just as he's like walking down the steps, a random janitor bumps into him and spills a bunch of water on him and puts out the flame. And feeling remorseful, the janitor tries to light the flame again, and just as he does, we see what we know to be now to be a Polpo stand, which is basically this remote stand that is kind of autopiloted to attack whoever reignites the flame of that lighter. And so because the old man lit it, the stand kind of turns to the old man and starts to attack him. No. Yeah, this show does not pull any punches. Like, dogs are killed left and right, old men are killed left and right. But before he attacks the old man, the stand actually has this arrow come out of its mouth, and he asks the old man whether he's going to die or become a chosen one, and then pierces the man's skull with the arrow, and the man dies. And so Giorno thinks chosen in this case means, you know, people who are going to enter the gang. But we as the viewer know that this arrow is actually one that gives people stand abilities if they're pierced with it and if they have like this special chosen quality. So yeah, the old man's killed because a janitor, I guess, doesn't have the right stuff to be a stand user. And the stand turns to Giorno and attacks him next before the show cuts out. And so yeah, a really fun episode, like most JoJo episodes are. And I feel like last week I discussed why this adaptation has helped me appreciate this more, this part of the series more. And I'm kind of experiencing that again because when I read this before, I hadn't really watched very many, you know, gangster or mob-based movies. But now I've kind of seen my fair share of them. So it's easy to see where Araki's pulled like his inspiration for scenes like, you know, Polpo being this guy who lives in jail, but he's got all the hookups like a TV and weapons and snacks and all this stuff because he has so many ties with the gang that even in jail he's kind of living the primo life. Of course, like the animation, color, character designs, all of it's on point. But something I really like in the show as a whole, and one that I see in this one, is that the stand fight in this episode isn't so much a fight so much as it's a teenager like hiding a lighter from water and wind and all these different things that can put out a flame. And it seems like it would be really boring, but it still has you on the edge of your seat the entire time. Like, Pulpo's stand is so seemingly worthless. It's like, oh, if I give you a lighter and the lighter goes out and you try to reignite it, then I can attack you. And it's such a random, dumb, seemingly pointless ability, but it finds its applications in moments like these. And so I always did appreciate Araki's ability to craft these really dumb, weird, inconsequential abilities, but still leave you on the edge of your seat with these quote-unquote battles. So yeah, a good episode. I really don't know what episodes I can expect to be bad. I always loved this part growing up, and I feel like I'm going to love this adaptation of it, so I guess I'm only going to have good things to say for now, but we'll see. So yeah, moving on to a show that seems to have an equally impressive color palette based on what you and Zach have shared with me. What's going on with Double Decker?
So I don't know if you remember us talking about Derek, who used to be Doug's former partner. But we thought he was dead, but he's actually not. So
Surprise.
Yeah, so I was caught off guard when they introduced Derek right off the bat, and he's getting discharged from the hospital. And Kirill thought he was dead, just like we did. And then Kirill, he replays this conversation that's like, oh wait, you're right. No one said he was actually dead. He was just like taken off the squad or whatever. And so it just shows you really have to pay attention to the dialogue, or else you'll be an idiot like Kirill.
We never said he was dead. You inferred that.
But so far, I love Derek the minute he showed up, because he seems like a really sweet guy who's always wanted to be a bartender, apparently. And he charms the ladies. And then I laughed when the nurses at the hospital were like, you should probably get shot again so you can visit us. And I'm like, what? So that was, yeah, kind of crude sense of humor.
It reminds me of that joke in Pokemon where, like, the Pokemon Center lady's like, we hope to see you again. And it's like, what's that supposed to mean?
Yeah. All right, I'll get injured.
Yeah.
But yeah, we still don't know why he doesn't want to go back to 7-0. But I like that Derek, he's still tight-knit with his former teammates. We see Dina visiting his bar, and I really want to like go to a bar like that because it looks really cool. But it's nice to see that he's still a part of like their team dynamic, even though he's not like actually on the team anymore. And so instead of focusing on Derek, we get a Dina and Kay centered episode, and they're like the double decker unit, so they're partners. And I'm actually really happy about this because I've been wanting to learn more about Dina, who's this like loudmouth rebel with a flashy fashion sense. And like she's more of like a I'm gonna do it my way, while Kay is more of like a I'm going to follow the rules. So it's already like very interesting to see how their dynamic works.
The classic buddy cop formation.
Exactly. So eventually, like at the end, like they learn to at least cooperate a little bit, and Dina calls Kay her dog. So it's just like, okay. And then so 7-0, there's like a nickname that the captain, he calls it Travis's Angels, because a lot of the team members are like women, so he's just like, oh, let's call everyone Travis's Angels. So I thought that was funny. But yeah, and then like at the end, Kirill, he finds out that I think her name is Yuri. She is actually a robot, and then he tells Doug, he's like, I think she's a robot. And then Doug, there's like a caption that's like, this is public knowledge, but then Doug was like, oh shit, like I'll keep it a secret. But then there's another caption that was like, yeah, Doug is kind of an asshole, because he's like trolling Kirill, and that like made me laugh so much. So it's just so great to see like each character's personalities like just really stand out. And yeah, I'm just really happy with the show every week.
That's good. I'm glad the comedy's still picking up. It seems like a good character-based series based on what I've heard from it, at least from you and Zach. So yeah, based on that, it sounds
Nushaw?
like, huh? Can you hear me? Ruh-roh. Alright, seems like Deanna can't hear me.
Are we back?
Can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. Okay,
When
I
did
won't question
it
it.
cut off?
You couldn't hear me for a bit. You were
Yeah.
talking, but I couldn't talk back.
Oh, yeah. It was like really quiet. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's it for me then.
Yeah, I cut you off the show. It wasn't working. So yeah, based on that, let's move on to the next show. Up next, I think we're talking about Karakuri Circus. Not as comedy based, but a little bit worked in there, even though the thumbnail would lead you to believe otherwise. So yeah, in this episode, I think last week I mentioned we ended with Narumi, Shirogane, and Masaru being ambushed by another puppeteer. And this one, unlike the other ones, has like his own specialized puppet that's kind of like idealized for combat. And so we start off this episode with another puppet fight, and an immediate red flag I noticed was we've swapped out the main puppet for a CG model. And
Oh no.
yeah, that's never a good sign. But yeah, it was kind of disappointing because in the first episode, like, I think I shared the clip with you and Zach. It was one that I was really hyped on. Like, I watched the fight scene over and over and over because it was just so well made. It was dynamic and fluid. The soundtrack really worked with it. And then in this episode, we see the same puppet and it's CG, and noticeably the movements are a little more dull. And it doesn't help that they used the same track as the first fight. And so it kind of made comparing the two even more easy, and that kind of made me not appreciate this fight scene as much. And I feel like it just didn't match with the tempo of the track behind it, just because CG can get so clunky sometimes. But without harping on that, the puppeteer is beaten pretty easily. Like, we're supposed to know that this puppet that Shirogane is using is kind of overpowered. Like, we don't really know the mystery behind why it was made or how it was made. We just know that something about the specs makes it a force to be reckoned with. So she defeats the puppeteer, but Masaru is actually held up at knife point by some thugs, but they're quickly disposed of by Narumi, the kung fu expert, the one I mentioned before, who has to make people laugh every few minutes or he dies. Yeah, and so they tried to explain that disease this episode, and it just didn't really do anything for me. Like, they went into some spiel about, like, parasympathetic nerves and how, because of that, his body suffers, like, seizures if he doesn't make someone laugh. And instead of kind of enlightening me to why it's happening, it just kind of confused me a little more. And I feel like they would have done better if they just kind of let it be, and just let it be like a character quirk of his. Like, we didn't really need like the scientific explanation behind it. This is something I was ready to accept, and then you guys tried to break out like this textbook definition of his disease. It didn't really work for me personally. But I feel like what happens next kind of saved the episode for me, because we get a little more insight into Masaru. We learn that his mother was actually a mistress to Saiga, the owner of this big company. I think they said it was the biggest automobile or pharmaceutical company in Japan. And so we learned his mother was a mistress, and that when she died, he was actually just recently brought into the Saiga family, and that he was bullied pretty much his entire childhood by both his classmates and his family, being seen as like kind of an outsider to both of those like realms. And so we get this kind of sweet characterizing moment for Narumi. Like, we see that he's very in tune with how children behave, and I think that comes from his experience of working as like a circus mascot. Like, his job is to make kids laugh, and so when he sees Masaru just kind of belts out the word mistress, this word that most children have no business knowing. And then he questions, like, why would a kid like that know this word? And it kind of, like, you visibly see it, like, break his heart, and it kind of endeared me to the character. And then we even learned that Narumi was kind of the same way when he was a kid, and they have this really heartfelt moment where Narumi, like, breaks out this photo album where all the photos are of him as, like, this scrawny little kid crying. Like, one's over, like, the food that he didn't like, one's, like, over his mom taking him to school. Like, he was always this weak, scrawny, crybaby kid. And so him and Masaru kind of bond over their old, quote-unquote, weakness and their, like, desire to grow and become, like, the better versions of themselves. And he's even about to teach Masaru some kung fu before they're interrupted. And I hope they go back to that, because that was going to be a very sweet moment, I feel. But anyway, Masaru gets kidnapped again by another puppeteer. No. I'm sensing a theme. It's like AG. Series. Yeah, pretty much. Like, the kid that you need to protect. It's escort missions all over again. And just as they're chasing the truck that has Masaru in it, and they lose him, and then they run into the old puppeteer that they actually just fought in the beginning of the episode, who tells them that the Saga family kind of has two groups right now. There's one that wants to hire assassins to kill Masaru, and that's what he belongs to. And then there's another group that plans on kidnapping him because their leader wants to adopt him for some reason, some unknown reason we don't know right now. And it was kind of strange because they were chasing this truck, and then they're stopped by this puppeteer, and they just kind of stop in their tracks and have this full-on conversation while the truck is getting farther and farther away. And it's like, you can still be chasing after the kid. I would hop into the car and maybe have this conversation while you're pursuing. But, I don't know, it just seemed like a weird break in the action to dump a lot of exposition on me. So yeah, the episode pretty much ends with them heading over to the Saiga, I think it was like a Saiga estate or something like that. And we learned that there are more frightening puppeteers guarding that area. So yeah, all in all, I feel like there was a definite drop in quality for this episode, animation-wise. Like, we saw the CG character movements were beginning to get a little more clunky, and the pacing does seem a little bit odd. Like, Narumi suddenly caring for this kid as much as he does just 2 episodes in isn't super believable, but I'm beginning to overlook that just because of how sweet the moments between him and Masaru were. But it doesn't sound like the pacing is going to get any better, since the series is 43 volumes long, and I hear that they plan on covering it all in this 36-episode anime. So,
oh my god.
Yeah, we might be in for like a roller coaster ride. I'm also definitely beginning to see the age in this show. I think it was written in like the 80s and the 90s. And there was like that super cliched shower fan service scene, you know, where like the main character's like, oh no, I left something in the other room. And he goes upstairs, and what do you know? She happens to be showering, and it like had me rolling my eyes into the stratosphere. But aside from that, I'm still invested enough in the characters to continue, so I'm not ready to drop it just yet, but the show definitely has 34 episodes to lose me, so we'll see. So yeah, moving on to another show that definitely has more than its fair share of humor than Karakuri Circus. What's going on with Golden Kamuy? It looks like they've introduced a lot of interesting characters only 2 seasons in, so I'm interested to hear about all these guys.
Yeah, so I mean, with the past season, they've been kind of showing us all these different characters, and it's only now that they all met up together by coincidence. And as you can see, they're having the Last Supper, and the 3 people on the left are actually dead. And so,
oh my god,
yeah,
those are corpses.
Yeah, because remember Edo guy, the taxidermist?
Oh my god, I didn't know that. So, what about the guy behind the big buff-looking dude? He looks like he's also...
Oh yeah, that's also a dead guy.
That's also a corpse? Oh my god, that brings such a dark little spin to what this series is doing.
Okay, so before I get into that, I do want to talk about the opening, because they actually showed the opening this episode, and it was very disappointing, only because they reused a lot of scenes, and it really showed that they probably ran out of budget. And like, I just feel like they're probably either not going to invest into making like an actual opening, or they're just they're not gonna Yeah, because I don't know, I'm so upset because the song is like so good, but then the animation, like it starts with Sugimoto and Ashiriba like eating this grass thing.
Grass.
And then yeah, it was just, and then there's like shots of like birds and stuff, and I'm just like, okay. But moving on to the plot. We move forward quite a lot, and Edo guy is dead. Rest in peace. But he doesn't die before he runs in a polar bear suit that he had in his house. Because Sugimoto and Shirashi, they track him down at his house, and then Edo guy like goes into the polar bear suit and takes the skins that he was like copying, so that they're like fake and real tattooed skins. And he was trying to find what's his name, Lieutenant Tsurumi, but somehow I think he goes to the coal mine, and then that's where Sugimoto and Shirashi end up going too. And then at that point, I have to question how Sugimoto can withstand a lot of these like deathly situations, because in the coal mine there were like explosions and like a lot of like gas leaks, but somehow Sugimoto is able to like survive. And then I guess that's why he has the nickname Immortal Sugimoto. But it's just kind of like, this guy must have been blessed by the gods or something, because I don't think anyone could survive that. So yeah, we end up seeing most of the characters come together, because the guy with the big forehead, like there's like a block on his forehead.
Yeah.
He he like busts into the coal mine like to break Sugimoto and Shirashi free, and then yeah, he's like holding them, like Sugimoto's like on his shoulder and like cradling his head as they're walking out. Oh my god, like this grown man holding onto this other grown man. So there's this character named Tsukushima, and he's one of Tsurumi's henchmen, and he's the one who ends up taking the fake and real skins back to Tsurumi after finding Edo guy in the coal mine. And then he tells Tsurumi that there are 5 skins, but when they're actually 6 skins. So the episode ends with Tsukushima leaving with the missing skin. So like there is betrayal going on. So I like that the soldiers, even though they're not major characters, they still have their own motives, and they aren't like there to be expendable. So we'll see what kind of role he plays in the next few episodes. But my only gripe, I guess, with this episode is that oftentimes the animation dipped in quality, but like what can you do? It's been this way since the first episode, so.
Yeah, I noticed the first episode of the first season, there was a few, we talked about it already, like the bear and the fire and all that, but it sounds like it's gotten at least a little better from that point. But it definitely sounds like there's still having some budget constraints or maybe some time constraints. I don't really know how the process behind making an episode goes, but it's kind of a shame that the opening's not enthralling enough, because that's usually what they use to like, you know, advertise the show. And so it's kind of a shame that it won't be drawing in people if the opening's lacking.
And they have a good track record of like songs that they use. So it just really sucks that for this season they decided not to give a crap about the opening.
Shots fired. Damn, Deanna.
I know.
Okay, so moving on to one show with interesting character designs to another, but maybe a little more disappointing. We actually got the finale of Muhyo and Rouji. So last episode, I think I mentioned that they were going to be attacked by this big Legend of Zelda looking creature. It was kind of like this amalgam of all these different prisoners' spirits who were like tied together into this one big creature, and it attacks Muhyo and Rouji, and they're swallowed up for a second, but of course Muhyo is able to bust out another spell that kind of one-shots the creature. But more importantly from that, Roji's actually able to finally use a spirit circle, which is like this very strong barrier. It's kind of like his reason for being around Muhyo is to protect him while he's casting these spells, and it seems like for the first time he's able to do it competently, and it's because he was kind of thrown into the moment and he's not overthinking things. So that was a neat little development for him. But just about when they're taken out of the creature, Muhyo actually collapses again. And then we learn this to be like a side effect of the potion that he took from the last episode that restores his Ren. But I guess it poisons him if he overdoes it. And he did drink the entire thing, which he wasn't supposed to do. So they're kind of incapacitated. And just when the finishing blow is about to be dealt, Enshu and their team realizes that Rio's in pretty dire circumstances. She desperately needs medical attention, and because his plans don't necessarily involve her dying just yet, they flee the scene. And we're taken back to the Magic Law Society where Muhyo is being treated, and then we learn from his teacher actually that all of these forbidden law users used to act individually, but something happened and now they're all working together to bring down this society that they live in, this one that they see like as flawed. And so there have been orders taken out to arrest all of these forbidden magic users, and just as we learned that they also sent over a kind of hit list. The forbidden law users send this like hit list that has all of our protagonists and everyone involved in it, and they're basically sending out like this declaration of war. And so it seems like they're really hyping up this confrontation between the law society that our characters are residing in and this one that uses forbidden law that sees that society as flawed. And we get this interesting moment where Muhyo's teacher asks him if he can take care of Enshu, like if he can arrest him or take care of him, maybe meaning kill him. And he flat out refuses. And everyone thinks this is just kind of Muhyo being a hard ass like he usually is. But Roji is actually able to deduce that Muhyo still cares for his old classmate, and that instead of killing him, he still has hopes that he can kind of make him see the light again. We also see like a flashback to a moment where they were using this spell that they were going to use to save Rio, and he kind of nonchalantly drops this line that he was saving this for Enshu. And it was kind of a sweet moment because this character Muhyo is kind of very guarded and cynical, and the only person who can really get him to slightly open up about this, and the only one who can really read him, is his partner Roji. And so I liked that dynamic between the two. It's just kind of a shame that they never really focus too heavily on it, as opposed to just like these random spirit battles that they have that aren't really very enthralling. We also get like a nice little opposition between Enshu and Muhyo where neither wants to kill the other, both kind of wants to convert the other to their side, and that seems like a pretty interesting dynamic. But again, it seems like every time they boil it down to the actual confrontation, that's when the show loses me, just because it's kind of hard to write an enthralling battle when the main character has this book that can solve everything, and his one weakness is if I lose the book, then my friends have to protect me until I can charge it up and use it again. But yeah, the series ends with Muhyo and Roji going back to their like plane, to their office, and everyone feeling a little motivated to tackle this forbidden law society. So yeah, that's the end of the series, and it was definitely one of many ups and downs. I feel like I had maybe 2 episodes that I really liked, but aside from that, it was just a lot of rigmarole and kind of boring battles, and they tried to market this as like a battle anime, I think, when it should have been like a shonen mystery or like spirit mystery kind of deal. Maybe something more akin to Kitaro that Zach's watching. Yeah. But yeah, the conflict they're hinting at now seems pretty interesting. It's just a shame that the whole anime was kind of hyping up to it instead of covering it. So I still kind of plan to pick up the manga, but we'll see. It didn't really leave on a sour note. The show always had just enough to keep me watching next week, but I feel like in a week or 2, I'm definitely going to forget everything I saw here. So
it's like Sirius the Jaeger.
Pretty much, yeah. It was good at the time, but then you're like, okay, I think I got the point. So yeah, moving on from that, let's move to something that looks like it has a little more budget behind its creation. How's Iroduku or Doku? Dooku, cool. Okay, how's Iroduku doing? Because I still misspelled it on OBS, so.
Damn it, Nushaw!
I'm sorry. It's my first time.
So this episode was your casual join our club episode.
Got it.
And that's it. No, I'm just kidding.
And to be continued.
So the photography arts club, they're trying to recruit Hitomi, and the one person who convinces her is, you guessed it, Aoi. And he's also the only one who knows she can't see colors, even though it should have been obvious to another club member, because there was a scene where she told Hitomi to pick the blue vial of like Stardust, and Hitomi picks the wrong one. Like she picks a pink one or something. And then they have Hitomi like walking on water, because that's what the Stardust lets her do, is like walk on water. And
as Stardust does, yes.
Yeah, and then that club member, the chick, she was like, she realized that Hitomi chose the wrong one, and was like, Hitomi, you chose the wrong one. And it's like, you can't say that, and then she's gonna like lose her focus, and then obviously she did, and then fell into the pool. But like that was the thing, like she was totally fine, even though it was the wrong Stardust. Like she was using her own magic to walk on water. So it was that moment that was kind of like rolling my eyes. But yeah, like it's obvious that they're really pushing Hitomi and Aoi together, and it's like we can't have everyone knowing Hitomi's secret because we have a romantic relationship trying to blossom here. So yeah, I'm holding this show to a different standard than like Bloom Into You, because this is going for like the heterosexual couples route, and like there's nothing unique that stands out between Hitomi and Aoi right now. So I don't know, I'm hoping, like, because a part of me doesn't want it to go like the love quad or love like octagon route, but like I also quad. Yeah, I also don't want it to feel like so bland and like just not that interesting. But yeah, despite me and Zach talking about the club president, who we thought was gonna like have a crush on Hitomi last week, they didn't really touch on it this episode, so I guess that's a good thing. But it's cool that we got to see magic being used in the form of Stardust, and that normal people are used to using these things, so it's not just exclusive to mages.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hitomi's granny, she's finally coming back to Japan, so I'm excited to see her in the next episode. But I feel like the show is at times trying to be sentimental, but I haven't really been feeling it since the first episode, because like we're supposed to feel bad for Hitomi, especially with her internal struggles and her inability to see colors, but they don't feel as urgent since the club members were so quick to accept her, so you feel like she'll be fine. So I kind of want to see more tension, like in the first episode when Aoi wanted Hitomi to clear things up about how she was caught leaving his house, and they thought she was his girlfriend or whatever. So to me, that like feels more realistic. So hopefully we get something like that.
Yeah, hopefully it picks up. I feel like there are shows every now and then where there's such an amazing production value, but just like everything behind it seems kind of empty.
Shallow.
Yeah. Like I remember, do you remember that show Cabaneri of the Iron Fortress?
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah. I remember that show like looked beautiful. It had like this amazing lighting and like color design and everything, but just like nothing really got me too hyped up for it. It just kind of seemed void behind all that.
It went so cliche too.
Yeah, exactly. And so hopefully this show doesn't go the same route, because from all the screenshots you guys have been sharing, it's like honestly beautiful. So I'm hoping it picks up.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving on to something a little not as colorful, but it's still got a bit of neat design in there. SSSS.Gridman.
Is that how you're supposed to pronounce it?
I don't know. I've been going Skridman, but I don't think that's pronounced correct. But yeah, so in this episode, we definitely get a little more thrown in there. Like they're definitely shaking up the format. Or at least as far as I know, I'm not super familiar with like Ultraman and Sentai series, so maybe this is very par of the course, but for me it seems like a unique spin. Akane, the one that we know has been creating the kaijus up until this point, creates something called an AI kaiju, which is basically a human that can transform into a kaiju to attack the city. And so it's not really controlled or mindless, it's like its own living person that can just kind of turn into a kaiju, much like Yuta can turn into Gridman. And so the episode kind of immediately throws us into this first battle between Anti, this AI kaiju, and Gridman. And so Gridman's kind of quickly defeated. Anti has this ability where he can take attacks and then like adapt to them. And so he was kind of like a natural check to Gridman, and so he loses. And after they're beaten, Yuta, Caliber, and Gridman just kind of go missing. Like, usually they would come out of the computer that they jump into to become Gridman, but the computer just kind of shuts off after this fight. And so we get this segment where our main characters think that he's just kind of gone, like he's kind of dead. And we learned in previous episodes that when people disappear like this, everyone kind of forgets who they were. And so they begin to suspect that maybe he's gone, and like their old friends, everyone's just kind of lost their memories of Yuta. And just as things are about to reach their worst, we see a group of very eccentrically dressed people enter the shop, and they all address themselves as Gridman's allies. We also learn that Gridman, Yuta, and Caliber were just fine, and they were just hiding so they could ambush the kaiju when it appears again. And so they battle the kaiju a second time. This time, another member of the alliance that Gridman's allied with turns into another weapon that he can use, kind of like how Caliber became a sword in the last episode, and they're able to beat him. And this time they come out of the computer, and they're all fine. But even though the kaiju is beaten, he still remains in his human form. And so he's not kind of dealt with yet. He hasn't just disappeared from the plane. He's still a human in the real world. And it seems like based on the end of the episode, Akane kind of disowns him, being like disappointed that he wasn't able to take down Gridman. And so now we just kind of have this like homeless, living kaiju roaming the streets. And so I'm interested to see what they do with his character. But we talked about CG a few times this episode, and I feel like this is one instance where they're using it well. They kind of have this nice mix between 2D and CG, and it makes, even though there are a lot of recycled shots in the fight itself, like when they use their special attacks or like their beams or whatever, the fight's still pretty well choreographed, and the CG isn't so clunky that it takes me out of it. So that's something I appreciate. It's just kind of like the Trigger quality that you've come to know and love. I don't really get what the point was of Yuta and Gridman going missing. Like, we knew they weren't dead, so like the whole melodrama of them worrying about where he was, just to hear that they were like hiding in like a ditch somewhere waiting for the kaiju to show up again, was kind of a letdown. I can kind of see why they would do it, maybe to establish how much Rikka cares for Yuta, because she kind of feels remorseful because just before he disappears, she like ignored a call from him. But I feel like when I watched it, the place my mind went to was, because the main character started off with his memories erased, I thought, okay, maybe when he dies or loses a battle, he like awakens, but all his memories are lost, and he has to kind of start from scratch. And so that's kind of where my mind was going, and to just hear that they were fine the whole time kind of let me down. But yeah, the show as a whole is definitely celebrating like Ultraman and anime tropes all together, and I do appreciate that. Like, I realized watching it that if anyone were to walk in and see the show that I was watching, all of their like preconceived notions of anime would be confirmed. There was like the giant monster fights, there was like the big beams, and the hero's theme song starts playing whenever he starts beating the kaiju. It's not tropey, it's more celebrating the cliches and stuff that anime has, but it's also throwing its own spin on it. Like, again, I'm not super familiar with Ultraman series, but I don't think I've ever heard of like this AI kaiju where like it's a human and it turns into a creature, and then based on the opening it sounds like he's going to have his own developmental moments. So I'm interested to see how they thread this line of like celebrating tropes and cliches but also tossing their own unique spin onto things. So it's Trigger, so I have not high hopes but hopes, so we'll see how that goes.
You also mentioned a female character who's quite popular among the fandom.
Yeah, Rikka. She has a very defining characteristic that artists all over Twitter are definitely jumping on board for. It's definitely something I've been seeing all week, is just fan art of her, and to a lesser extent, but still pretty prevalent, of her and Akane. But I mean, that's what you got to do, I guess. That's what sells these shows sometimes, is these weird character designs that people want to fantasize about. I don't know. I don't want to jump too far into that realm.
I imagine there being like waifu wars right now between her.
Oh, absolutely,
and
yeah.
02.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Hopefully this show doesn't go the same route as the show that shall not be named, but
yes.
I have no segue for this jump in shows because I can't find a single tying link between the two of them. So how about we just talk about Rerent Tsukumogami?
So
this one ended this week too, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So the image you see there is the end card, and each episode, the end card has been illustrated by Lily Hoshino. So
who dat?
Oh, she's a mangaka, but she's also worked on some character designs for like, I don't know if you've heard of Mawaru Penguin Drum.
I haven't.
Okay, well, she did
Sounds
that.
good.
Yeah, so if you're familiar with her art style, then yeah, you'd recognize her. But anyways, so for this final episode, I could tell they were really trying to speed through it, and like I was ranting about the show last week, but this week I'm just kind of like, okay, this was expected. So Seiji, like always, figures out what's up with Satoru and explains to Oko that or he explains what happened, and Oko gets really angry and slaps him across the face, which was such a cathartic moment for me. And she yells at him about guys getting worked up over weird things and that she's mad at Satoru and Seiji for different reasons. But like, I was just so happy to see her wrath, and I was like, for her to just finally be able to take control of the situation, I was like, yes. But then it switches to Satoru, who has actually been in town for a while, and he's been looking for another incense burner that's like the relative to Suo, and he's trying to obtain it so he can return it to Oko as a form of apology for breaking the other incense burner that Oko traded with the hair comb. So it's a little confusing there, but Seiji finds Satoru in some warehouse, and Oko barges in because she heard from Notetsu, the Bat Tsukumogami, that he had been hit on the back of the head and passed out. And she like immediately runs towards Seiji and like completely ignores Satoru, who he thought he was gonna become like part of the family, like getting married to Oko. But Oko just like hugs Seiji, and they have this really intimate moment that made me cringe because they're actually cousins.
Those are always like, fun.
Yeah, and then like initially we thought they were siblings, but that's only because Seiji just insisted on calling Oko Ne-san. So like they're still kind of unrelated by blood, but I just couldn't help but feel uncomfortable with that moment. And then of course the image you see right in front of you, like but yeah, everything goes back to the daily routine of them just renting out their items, and then Oko, she like doesn't want anything to do with Satoru anymore, and then that's it.
That's it. Not to be continued.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So what I really appreciate about the show is how it brings back characters from previous episodes and like connects them with each other. So they're not just like they're one episode and gone the next. Like they all have interactions with each other. And then I also really like the Tsukumogami, the character designs, and the jazzy soundtrack. Those were all strong points of the show. And the weakest point would be the plot. I didn't feel any reward once the whole Satoru issue was resolved. It was more like, finally, it's done. It's over. Everyone go home. So
I can put this to rest. It was very much we mentioned it before, but the 0-2 effect.
Yes. So those are my closing thoughts on the show.
So it sounds like it didn't really end on a big high note for you.
It was mediocre, yeah.
That's always a good sign. Another forgettable one, I guess.
Yeah.
Did they ever... You mentioned a couple weeks ago, or maybe last week, that they never really focused too heavily on the Tsukumogami themselves. Did they ever fix that, or did it kind of go out with that same tone?
It went out with that same tone.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. And like apparently the show is based off of a novel, so I don't know like how different it is, but yeah, I was really happy about it in the beginning, and now it's kind of just like, okay, that's it.
Yeah, too many shows that just kind of fizzle out here and there, but it's kind of the perks of being an anime viewer. So yeah, now it's finally time to move on to the shows that we're both watching.
Big boys.
The big boy shows, yeah. One of them being especially big boys, and one that's a much different tone compared to the show that we just talked about. Attack on Titan. This was another show that actually concluded this week. One that I wasn't expecting. I was expecting like 24 episodes or something, and to hear it was only 12 really threw me off guard. But yeah, I don't even know where to begin. There were so many good moments in this little closer, but we do begin with Levi, and he's being entrusted with the syringe with the Titan serum, the one that can turn anyone into a Titan. He's being entrusted with it, and he's basically being told that he has free reign to use it on anyone if he feels like the situation would call for it. So we know that they're planning to take back Walmaria, and so possibly there's going to be a moment where Levi feels that he needs to turn one of his teammates into a Titan to gain the upper hand. And maybe that's going to happen a little later. But we have this conversation between Erwin and Levi, who also discuss the plan of taking back Walmaria, and we get quite a bit of insight into Erwin's character. Levi basically tells him to stay behind a desk because he's kind of this leading force of humanity, and even though he can't fight very well because he's lost his arm, he's still kind of like a pillar of support for humanity. And so realizing how important he is, he tells him to kind of stay in an office and work. Erwin, of course, refuses outright, saying that he wants to be there the moment the truth is revealed, because more so than anything, what he cares about is uncovering the truth. We saw that his father actually died because he got too close to the truth, and so we know that he's kind of got this deep instilled, not hatred, but just like he really needs to know what's going on just to kind of receive this catharsis that he wants for himself, not just for humanity. And I feel like his character has definitely got the most fleshing out this season. So that was a really nice moment. Moving on from the darker tone of the show, we have the scouts preparing for their mission to take back Walmaria. And for the first time in God knows how long, the team is served meat. And this kind of results in the entire hall like erupting into fights and screams as Levi's squad, proving to be the barbarians that they are, start almost killing each other for this small share of meat. And of course, knowing Sasha, she's the one that goes absolutely batshit insane. I think she like bites. She's great. Yeah, I think she like bites John's hand, and they have to literally like tie her up and restrain her to just to calm her down. And I don't think she even ends up getting meat at the end of it. She just kind of gets tied up for the rest of the night.
They leave her there.
They do leave her there. But yeah, it was a very nice change of tone. I feel like this show has a good pacing with its tone. Like we get dark, but then we have these moments of light that kind of keep us from experiencing palette fatigue when it comes to the really dark tones and messages. There was also that really nice scene with Eren and John, where John starts poking and prodding at Eren again, and for the first time, Eren, who's finally got this like clarity after their past few experiences, finally starts poking back. And even though these two are very combative, like you see John kind of experience this relief, like this person that he's been picking and bullying on, and they have like this weird warped friendship is finally back, and so they have a fist fight in the middle of the hall. And it's like funny, but also kind of sweet and endearing to see that they're both acting like themselves again after this roller coaster of a series. And then, yeah, Eren, Mikasa, and Armin leave the hall, and they start talking again about their dreams to see the outside world, the world outside of the wall. And they kind of remember their past selves and what life was like before the Titans. It was a very final episode-esque feel where they're kind of wrapping everything up and reigniting like the dreams that they want to accomplish. And they have this really nice scene where they feel like they spot Hannes for a second, and it just happens to be this guy that looks very similar to him. So yeah, the show ends with the scout regiment leaving to take back Walmaria, and for the first time ever, we see the people actually cheering them on. Before, they were always kind of ridiculed for being the only ones who go out of the wall and kind of prodding these Titans who were attacking humanity. And for the first time, we see everyone's kind of rallying together and becoming like a strong, coherent unit. Like they're all cheering on the people that are going out and fighting for them. And that was a pretty nice moment. We finally see Eren let out this like, or not Eren, Erwin let out this like roar and raising his fist, and he kind of like pushes everyone and makes them all inspired, and they go out to take back Walmaria, and the show ends until we get hit with the most gut-wrenching cliffhanger I've ever seen. Very horror movie-esque. I have so many questions. That shot of like the Beast Titans staring at you through your screen with like the static and everything like gave me chills. But yeah, without getting too into that, I'll leave some of that to you. What did you think of this episode, Deanna? I know you have a lot of thoughts.
It was very optimistic. I felt like, you know, there are a lot of moments where we got a call back to the early days of Attack on Titan with the scouts just being like foolish kids and the whole fist fight and stuff, which is really funny. And it's just funny how like Eren and Jean kept hitting each other, and then they're like, why is no one stopping us?
Yeah, at some point they're like, oh shit, I'm gonna throw up this meat that we haven't had in years.
Yeah. And something I noticed was Historia wasn't shown in the group of scouts like ready to go into battle or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming she's staying behind because she's gonna handle like the royal matters in the city.
Yeah, so, I think she just wanted to be a participant in the last fight to kind of gain everyone's favor, and then she kind of fell into like her role after that. Yeah,
so that leads me to the the scene at the end with like Levi, Eren, and Mikasa. And obviously Eren, he just came out of his like Titan transformation because we see those lines around his eyes. But then I went full on detective mode and zoomed in on these two figures lying nearby them on the rooftop. And they're blonde figures, and one of them can't be Historia. And like, so like, how many other blonde characters do we know?
Yeah, we got Erwin like, and Armin.
Yeah, and one of them, their body is like burnt up. So I'm just like, oh no.
Oh man, we both talked about our hypotheses for these, but like I definitely do think Armin's a goner. Like that scene where he kind of doubles down on that dream of seeing the ocean and no one believes him, and he's like, no, I'm gonna go see it, and then we have this cliffhanger. I really don't see him living past the next season, but
that's definitely a death flag.
Yeah, it's one if I've ever seen one. And I think the poster for like the next season was like Eren staring out at the sea, and it's like, oh man, he's gonna find the sea, and Armin's not gonna be there, and I'm gonna cry.
And like the whole thing, it was just really eerie because it kept interrupting, like someone was hacking into the broadcast.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if that's gonna like play a part in the actual show, or if it's just a sort of like creative decision by the studio for like a preview, I guess.
Yeah, it did seem kind of out of place for Attack on Titan, like static and cutting in scenes and stuff like that. It seemed more like horror movie-esque than this show that we've come to watch, you know?
Yeah. But we gotta wait until April 2019.
God. I don't know.
Which is going to be a strong season, so.
That's true, yeah. We'll have a lot to talk about. And I don't know. I felt like I wanted to pick up the manga, but I feel like the anime does such a good job of adapting it that I'll be fine waiting.
Same.
All right. Well, the 1-2 punch that we all know and love. Let's move on to Bananafish, and I'll let you handle the plot synopsis for this one.
Okay. Oh boy. Okay, so I have a lot of mixed feelings about this episode. Nothing to say, like nothing bad to say, but more so like how am I supposed to feel about certain scenes? So I actually saw a preview of this episode and teared up because I saw Ash getting cut open, but thank God that wasn't him.
It was just a body double that looked a little too eerily like him.
I was like, oh hell no. And also, Dr. Mannerheim is not Golzine, so that's kind of a good thing. But then also, Golzine, he was okay. Like, he's not really a good guy after what he did in this episode, which is to stop the operation on Ash from occurring. Because, like, Dr. Mannerheim wanted to use Ash's IQ or, like, brain to use the Bananafish drug, right?
Yeah, they wanted to test Bananafish on him.
Yeah, so like they can have complete control over him. But yeah, Golzine like barges in and like stops the operation from happening, and then kind of lets Ash like live because he kind of wants to play this cat and mouse game with him. So yeah, and then so there's that part, and then I do want to highlight Eiji's character development in this episode, the confrontation between him and Yue, and so like Eiji, he became so like daring and willing to do anything for Ash, but like to a degree, because Yue asks him like, "Would you kill me for Ash?" and then kind of like goads him and like saying Ash would kill anyone to like protect you or whatever. And so, like, just as Eiji is like holding Yue at gunpoint, like he puts down the gun and was like telling Yue like, "You don't understand." And at that point, I think Yue got frustrated because it's like, yeah, Yue, he doesn't understand the relationship that Eiji and Ash have, and that's something that really differentiates between Ash and Yue, despite them growing up similarly. And so, like we talked about how Yue, like, he realizes Eiji is Ash's weakness, and that he's constantly saying how alike he and Ash are, but now they kind of walk different paths, and Yue doesn't have a weakness, but I'm sure that'll change with Sing in the picture, because obviously we see Sing kind of like following him like a little puppy, you know, like, oh, I can't leave him alone. So but yeah, and then like Max, Eiji doesn't believe Ash is really dead, so they really have faith in Ash for surviving whatever is coming his way. But speaking of Max, my heart was so full when Max called Ash his son.
Oh yeah, then... I'm your dad after all.
Yeah, and then I was so glad he like confronted Golzine at the airport and like gave him this stank eye, and I was like cheering him on. I'm like, yes, stare him down.
He's absolutely my favorite character so far.
Yeah, please do not touch Max.
Don't touch him. You already mashed Shorter into a pulp. Please just
oh
leave
my
me,
God.
Max.
Yeah. And then, like, okay, finally we get to the candy bar scene. And oh my God.
That was a trip, yeah.
It's like, it's funny when you watch it, and like the voice acting was amazing. Like, props to the voice actor.
Yeah.
But we have to remember that Ash is only 17 years old, and he's been doing these things to survive, and it's not out of fun or pleasure. So it's like really uncomfortable at the same time to watch that. And then, but like, it was really nice to see, like, when he said that he'd send that guard to heaven, like, he was not lying. He like killed him.
He literally sent him to heaven. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you feel about this episode?
Very much the same. Like you mentioned, I think we mentioned this before, but like the moments where Ash does anything other than be a gangster is still kind of gut-wrenching, because it's like, even when he's doing stuff like what we mentioned in this episode, or when he's just being super smart and answering all these questions that someone his age has no answer or no reason answering, like, it reminds you that he's just a kid, and that like without all this gang and mob influence, like, you wonder what he could have become if he wasn't tied down by all that. And then, speaking of like the people who have this weird relationship with him, Golzine kind of sees him as game, like prey that he needs to take down. Like, if he just meets his end there, it's not fulfilling enough. He wants to like chase Ash down and like wring the life out of his neck, and we can tell right off the bat that this is going to lead to his downfall. But it was nice to see that. It was nice to see him lose composure for a bit, you know? Like, he's always been this like calm, collected guy, but we see him kind of have this weakness for Ash, and we also kind of see him lose power. Like, I think Senator Kippard is now in charge of everything involving Bananafish. Like, he's kind of been ousted from power. So I'm interested to see what happens to him now that he's kind of lost everything. But yeah, they are really foreshadowing Ash's death. I mean,
that dream.
The dream, and like all the images of snow and ice. Like, we had that story about the mountain lion getting lost in the snow and dying in this like territory that wasn't familiar to him. And we have, even in the opening, like the title card, it's like made of ice. And so it really doesn't seem like Ash is going to make it out of this one. We still haven't met that character in the opening, the one in the trench coat. I'm wondering what his tie is going to be to it, but I feel like once he makes himself known, we're gonna the clock to Ash's death is gonna start ticking. But
no,
I know, I don't want it either, but they're definitely hinting at it. So yeah, good episode though. I'm excited to see where it keeps going. So yeah, we're definitely jumping tone to tone to tone because up next is Radiant. But this one definitely made me cry more than Bananafish ever has. So, a basic plot synopsis. I think we left off last time with Seth holding back the Nemesis from attacking the village people, and he's finally able to not defeat but kind of incapacitate it. And then Alma jumps in and deals the finishing blow, and everyone is kind of aware of Seth's ability to use Fantasia without the magic gloves, and I guess that's a rarity even among sorcerers. So sorcerers are already kind of persecuted, and even among sorcerers it seems like people who can use these spells and everything without tools or gloves are even further persecuted. So we'll see where that goes. We learn also about the show's namesake. We learn that Radiant is the nest where Nemesis reside, and even though no one knows if it's truly real, Seth makes it his goal to destroy it and kind of better the name of sorcerers like Alma, who aren't going around and hurting people, but just trying to live like honest lives. And speaking of Alma, we get a pretty hefty flashback and her whole backstory. We learned that I think we started off in the fire that she saved Seth from. I don't know if it was like a nemesis attack or something like that, but she saves this boy, Seth, and she awakens to have no memories aside from her name and the fact that she saved this boy. And so she pretty much takes Seth along on her journey to discover who they were before this accident. And they made it a rule to highlight that she really didn't care for Seth at all. He was kind of a tool, because if anyone recognized him, odds are they would recognize her. So he was kind of a tool to her to find out what she was before this accident. And that all changes when Seth has an accident and lets his powers go loose, and she returns to a village to see that he's being like burned at a cross almost. So she saves him, and then when she holds him for the first time, she realizes that this is just like a scared little boy, and she finally sees how weak this kid is, and so she finally kind of embraces this motherly role for her, and she promises that she's not going to let this kid become this monster that everyone sees him as, and that she's going to raise him to be this upstanding citizen. And from there, we just get this really heartwarming like backstory of like her buying this floating fortress so the two of them can live together and just travel town to town and discover who they really are, not really having like an end goal in mind, but just kind of traveling and enjoying each other's company. And we cut to the present, and Seth is about to leave this motherly figure of his and go find the Radiant. And just as he's about to leave, he's stopped by Alma, who gives him her broom and tells him to promise her that he's not going to become a monster on his journey, because she's no longer there to look after him, and it's kind of up to him now to grow up and be this upstanding sorcerer. And so he promises that, and before he leaves, he gives her one last hug goodbye. And this is where my heart fucking broke, because both of the voice actors, like, you could hear their voices like quivering, and like you haven't seen Seth lose composure yet, and just this moment right here just destroyed me. And this coupled with like her pulling out his little jacket from the chest, and like there were so many moments here that just annihilated me. So yeah, he flies away, and we finally end the first arc. The character's finally left his hometown, and he's starting his adventure, and the shonen series can now finally begin. So yeah, I definitely have a lot of thoughts on this, but to save on me just ranting, or not ranting, but saying only positive things about this show, Deanna, what did you think? I'm sure you felt the same way. We also talked about it a little before, and it seems like we were both teary-eyed at the end of it.
Yeah, I want to mention first, did you watch the post-credits scene?
I keep missing. Oh wait, is that was that with the Inquisition?
Yes.
Okay, I did see it.
Okay. So, yeah, I really loved this episode because we finally see the flashback between Seth and Alma, and I really like that they took their time with it, and it just really, like, they showed Alma's developing like feelings for Seth grow into this motherly figure. And I feel like that's something you don't see too often in shonen anime, like it always seems like it's a male mentor figure. And like it's just so great to see that, you know, with Seth leaving his mother's nest, as you would say, um, nothing like bad happens to her for him to like leave. So she's still going to be there, but it's like he's choosing to leave on his own journey, and then maybe he'll come back and see her again. And I really hope so, because I want to see more of Alma.
I pray this isn't the end of her character, because she really won me over. I already liked her. I'm like a sucker for the mentor character, but like this episode as a whole, like she's become one of my favorites already.
Yeah, like I mean, she still hasn't gotten her memories back, so that has to be
true.
something. Yeah. So, baby Seth is the cutest baby boy ever.
Yes, he is.
And I was so heartbroken when those kids start beating the shit out of him.
I know.
I was like, damn, hold off, please.
It's just a boy.
I know. So, yeah, and then when the episode break, the illustration that shows up, explaining how the floating castle that Alma got for Seth, like how it protects like her most precious item or something, and I was like, oh my god, that's totally Seth.
Oh
that's so
no,
precious.
I didn't read that.
Yeah, you have to read those things because they really like give you clues on what's going on. Like last week's episode was about the gloves, and then that's why like when Seth's gloves got burned off, but he was still able to use his magic or whatever, like that was like, okay, he's not a normal sorcerer.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the Inquisition, they all look like baddies, and there's one guy whose eyes were like shadowed, and it looks like he's gonna be the one to trail after Seth. And in the preview, we're gonna finally meet Seth's crew that he's gonna go with on his journey.
Yeah,
so
I'm really excited.
Be interesting. Yeah.
We mentioned this last week, but this is like one of the moments where I feel like pacing played a big role into why this moment hit so hard. Like, I think last week we both mentioned like it seems like this episode was really dialogue heavy and nothing really happened, but I feel like being able to spend that much time in this town that Seth's grown up in, like we also kind of accepted this area as like a comfort zone, and like Alma as like this comforting figure, and then when he leaves, it's like we're leaving with him, and so like that kind of hit me harder than if this was just like a classic one episode leaving the town arc, you know? So I'm really happy that they're taking the time to really build up like an emotional response, because this episode really paid it off for me, and I'm hoping it does the same later.
Yeah, like you're talking about pacing, and that makes me wonder like if they're gonna do an anime original ending for this season, because obviously the manga's still ongoing, and considering like it releases like 2 volumes per every few months, like that's gonna take a while.
Yeah, I'm hoping it sticks a little true to the manga, but
yeah,
we'll see. If they continue what they're doing now, I'm sure even the anime exclusive ending is gonna be a solid one. So yeah, I think we only have one more show to talk about this week, and that would be Run with the Wind. What happened in this episode?
This week's episode should be titled Running Out of Breath.
Running out of wind.
Yes. So, everyone's finally running and training to become, runners.
The running Hokage.
Yeah. So, it's obvious Prince is going to get more of a focus down the road because he's considered the weakest link. But, and you can kind of tell because Haiji, I feel like he's starting to feel bad for like making Prince run. Like that's what I hope, but
I hope so, but he's kind of been an asshole this entire series so far.
Yeah, but I'm sure like we'll see like some sort of rewarding like end to Prince's character arc, because we like to see characters improve. So we have an introduction of Hanako, and like much like Haikyuu, everyone's motivated because she's there. And like I don't know, I don't like that Haiji used her to appeal to the guys, especially when she's still in high school and like these guys are in college. But like I thought her character introduction was so funny because like she just falls down the hill and runs past Kakaru, and then it's like, oh, there she goes. So hopefully she plays a bigger role rather than just being there to look pretty and be a motivator for the guys. But Yeah, and then we also see Kakeru's rival, who looks like a straight up douchebag.
Judging a book by its cover much, Dana?
No, because he looks exactly like this character from Fate's Day Night, who's like a complete dick. So
he's got
yeah,
like the
I might be
sunken
biased. Yeah, but yeah, like Kakeru looks like he's afraid of this guy, and that makes me wonder like what went down between them in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we'll see that next week. And then we also learned that Kakeru doesn't work well with others, and I feel like maybe like he feels protective of the other guys since like he took the time to explain how the Hakone Ikeden works and the preliminaries work, and then like all those statistics that makes my head spin. But I feel like he's explaining those things as a way of like making sure they don't feel embarrassed, like kind of saying like, oh, are you guys sure you want to be a part of this? Because I feel like you can't handle it. But I feel like it's more protective rather than like, oh, I'm better than you guys. Because
Right.
I don't think he's on that same level as like Ayano. So
Yeah.
So if that's the case, if that's his character, then I am starting to warm up to him. So, and like with the flashback we saw last week, we see Kakeru looking kind of like he feels really bad for the kid lying on the floor or whatever. So obviously he cares for his teammates. So there's a reason why he's like the twins called him out for like, why are you so afraid? Like, why do you care? Like, if we're not going to make it to the preliminaries. So I thought that was really interesting. And then the smear effects, they're back in this episode.
They are, yeah.
And I like how every time Kakeru runs, his hair slicks back. So that was a really nice detail.
Yeah, I think shows like this and Haikyuu and Ballroom, they all kind of had that attention to detail with like the physics behind the hair and like how the mouth moves, and especially with something as kinetic as running, like if it was static, it would really show. So it's good that they're not cutting any corners there.
One last thing, I would say we should have Jetsay Run play in the background when they do the marathon.
No. I mean, it goes with everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, so that'd be funny.
It would. I'm sure someone's already put it up.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Yeah, Kakeru is definitely going to be getting a little bit of development, and I think we saw with how desperate he was to convince people not to run. Like, he's definitely been hurt by this sport, and so it doesn't make sense to him that nobodies would just want to jump and throw themselves into this, especially when we learn that, like, you have to be, like, what, in the top 20th percentile to even qualify to run or something like that, and, like, you have to have a pretty hefty record under your belt before you can even enroll in the marathon. So it's like they're really in over their heads, and when you consider that Prince still can't even run, it's kind of natural for him to be skeptical. But yeah, I really did like the twins this episode. They're definitely like the quirky, funny ones, and it makes sense that they would be the first to embrace it. Like, they've had their past with soccer, and so they kind of have the endurance already, and being so impressionable and already being exposed to sports, like, it makes sense that they would be the first ones to join the team full-heartedly. But yeah, I guess we're gonna learn later what Prince or what Haiji's reasons were for getting Prince on board, so hopefully we'll get a little more insight into that later. But yeah, I'm hoping to learn more about Kakeru, so it sounds like we're gonna get more of that next week.
I really liked Prince's shirt.
What was the shirt?
It just said why. It was like naze.
Oh my god, he's already like the college meme lord.
Yes. So constantly like laying face down on the floor.
Yeah, these little character quirks are so great. It's one of the main draws for the show, I think, already. All right. We're not talking about Trigun this week because we're going to wait for the whole crew to get back together to discuss that. So I think that's going to be it for this week. I don't know if there's any formal outro I'm supposed to do here, but thanks for listening. See you next week. Bye.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you for co-hosting. All right. Later, guys.
Okay, bye.